Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 107 of the Tick Boot Camp podcast. The title of today's interview is Under Her Skin, an interview with Melanie Hubert. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
So, Matt, this is another one of those stories where we have a young child at 12 years old getting bitten by a tick and then getting sick a second time when she was 25.
Rich, what I found most interesting about Melanie is that her Lyme disease always presented on her skin first. When she was 12, she had Bell's palsy, which was an indicator of her Lyme disease. And then again, when she was 25, when she got sick again, she presented with horrible skin issues.
So, Matt, Melanie really had a very interesting journey that I think our folks are going to love to hear about. So, without further ado, Melanie Hubert and Under Her Skin. Hey, Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're really blessed to have you, Mel, and we really appreciate you joining our podcast and sharing your journey with our listeners. So, Mel, can you tell us where you are right now?
So right now I traveled up from Miami where I reside, and I'm in a 3-story log cabin in the mountains in Georgia.
And what are you doing in Georgia?
So I decided I kind of took a jump on things, and I figured, I work in events. I'm not going to be working for some time. I figured, it'd be a nice time to get out into some solitude, and I decided to head up to Georgia because of the whole quarantine thing. So me and my boyfriend have been up here for almost 2 months.
So now it's important for you folks who are suffering from Lyme disease to make sure that you make intentional decisions. And did you make the intentional decision to leave Miami and go to Georgia so that you could be safer?
I did. I wanted to basically separate myself. I didn't know the seriousness of it. I already was kind of getting work, where the events were being canceled. So I figured, he works from his computer. We knew his buddy, luckily, has allowed us to stay at his cabin out here, and figured, we packed everything up. We planned it out, and we just headed up here and just figured we make the best of it out here, which has been really nice.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. So now, Mel, I'd like to walk back to your journey about a year ago. I understand that you were living in Miami prior to this COVID crisis, and you were working in the event planning arena. Is that correct?
Yes.
How are you feeling about a year ago?
A year ago, wow, I'm not really good with the whole number gauge of your health, whether you're 1 to 10, but man, it did feel like I was just beneath that. I for about a good 6 months to a year, I felt really like I was barely trudging along. And then for about a month before, I guess maybe 11 months ago, a year and a month, where it was like before I decided to go back to Maryland, I was feeling awful. I didn't even know where to connect it, but I just couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't, bathe myself. I couldn't, do dishes, laundry, anything. And my skin actually was a telltale sign of my health being just out the window. And it got to the point where, I looked like I had holes in my face, like no joke. I could put my pinky in my cheek, and I was just sending videos to my dad, and I was just like, well, I don't know what's going on, but like I can't function like this. So this time a year ago, I was in Maryland. I came back up from Miami, and I was staying with my family so they could help me figure out what was going on.
So now let's talk about your childhood, because it's our understanding that you've been dealing with Lyme disease for a good portion of your life. Do you recall during your childhood when you were bitten by a tick?
I actually was outdoors a lot as a kid. I have one of 5 siblings, and we were just always an outdoor bunch. And I do recall finding ticks on me multiple times growing up, and we would just pick them off, and we didn't even have any worry in the world. Just take it off. You'd check each other's hair before we come back in. All of us did a little assembly line. And I just remember one day, I didn't actually see the tick, but I had the bullseye, or the rash from it. And my mom took me to the doctor, and we didn't actually send anything in because I guess the tick wasn't there, or maybe my mom, I don't recall because I was just young. But I do remember going to the doctor and them just examining it, but I didn't actually physically see that tick, but I'd seen plenty on me before.
So Mel, let's set this scene for a moment. So how old were you when you had the event that resulted in the bullseye rash that caused your parents to take you to the doctor?
I was 12 years old.
Okay. Now, where were you living at that time?
I was living in Laytonville, Maryland. It was just a small city outside of Bethesda or Rockville, Maryland, kind of near DC.
And what did you know about ticks at that time? You said that you had contact with ticks, you and your siblings were outdoorsy kinds of kids, you were getting ticks on you and having ticks removed. Other than knowing that ticks existed and knowing that you should check to remove them, did you know anything else about ticks and what ultimate illnesses you could suffer as a consequence of being bitten by a tick?
Oh, I had no idea. I mean, and my parents were I feel like they're very knowledgeable, and they educated us on a lot. I mean, I feel like if they knew, they would have definitely told us. And it was just kind of one of those things like I just knew as a kid, check for ticks. That we tucked our pants in our socks. We were always hiking. We wear a hat. Like, we knew all the tricks, but I didn't know really why we were having this preventative care. So I just knew that they were bad, and I had no idea that they led to anything like this, like, at all.
So now you're 12 years old. You show the signs of a bullseye rash, and you get brought to the doctor. Who found the rash, and what do you remember about the rash before going to the doctor?
I just remember, I don't remember much, but I just remember it being a little swollen and red, and I didn't think that much of it. I think my mom did remind me later that I did have some sort of fever or temperature, and then we went to the doctor, and she assumed that, I think the doctor had informed my mom about it potentially being Lyme. Again, we didn't get a full diagnosis, but it was just like, hey, we think this is Lyme, so why don't you just take these medications just in case it is, and then, we'll go from there.
So now, after you had your bullseye rash and you went to the doctor and the doctor prescribed you medications, did you get better?
I think I thought I was getting better. I mean, the rash went away. I didn't have a fever anymore. But ironically enough, that's when I first started getting into the modeling and acting industry, and I did training for years, probably a year and a half, for this giant modeling and talent, competition in New York. I mean, 8,000 agents came from all over the world. I had been rehearsing commercials and, just auditioning just to practice up until that point. And what happened, I think it was maybe a few weeks later, I had been still on the medication. I remember taking it. I was up in New York, and one of the side effects they thought was from the medication, which I now believe is from actual Lyme, was Bell's palsy. My entire half of my face went completely numb. And I still have some I don't think my face ever recovered to be evenly or as symmetrical. Of course, no one's face is exactly symmetrical, but I just can tell that when I was there for 5 days, supposedly the medicine was supposed to help with that, but the side effect came after I had started. So they tried to say that the medicine was contributing to Bell's palsy, but I mean, imagine you going and training for a year, something that was like my entire passion from a kid. I mean, I wanted to sing, dance, act, everything since I was very young, and go up and do this competition. And my half of my face, literally my eye, I couldn't even blink it. My nose, I couldn't flare it. I couldn't smile with the other side of my mouth. So it was lopsided. And imagine that's like your dream coming out there. That was the main side effect. And it went away. Unfortunately, right after I left the competition, the Bell's palsy went away. I had finished the medication. So at that point, it seemed like, okay, this is the end of it. I'm getting better now.
Now, how do you believe your Lyme disease that you suffered when you were 12 years old impact your life moving forward? You did share with us now that you had a bad experience that had an impact on a modeling opportunity or a competition that you went to. What other ways did your Lyme disease develop, and how did it negatively impact your health as you were growing up?
Well, at the time, I didn't think it was Lyme disease, but I'll tell you just from me knowing this now and looking back that I can examine it differently. But growing up, thinking that it was over with, I really did believe that I had a lot of trouble growing up, and I'm one of 5 siblings. So you think at least I would relate to one of them when it comes to just my upbringing, maybe getting into trouble and mischief. But I mean, that was my life, and I felt really defined by being rebellious and just misbehaving and just very depressed and couldn't understand myself. I didn't think anybody understood me. I had, experienced a lot of self-harm, self-sabotaging, and at that time, I thought that, oh, I just must be depressed. This is something my parents may have passed on to me, or, this is, how am I not grateful for my life? Like I have everything that's going for me. And, a lot of that really struggled with me because I would try at a young age. I didn't know much about like meditation or really trying to express gratitude or the law of attraction, which I practice today. But it really affected me because I'm walking around thinking, wow, like I'm just this depressed girl. I'm diagnosed with bipolar and this and that. And meanwhile, I'm like, I don't believe this. I just don't believe this is me. I had quite an identity issue, I think, growing up, and always trying to almost reinvent myself. I experimented with, alcohol and drugs at a young age. And I just felt like I didn't even have friends who had done those things. So I felt really outcasted, and always was trying to almost like live on the edge just to get this adrenaline rush to kind of escape from this person that I didn't like, and it's more so because I just wanted to disconnect from what I couldn't connect with. I didn't understand why I was feeling this way. And I think that was the biggest struggle of the side effects from Lyme that I now can look at and realize that was the reason why I was like that growing up.
So now, did you treat with mental health professionals when you were going through these challenging times in your childhood?
Yes, I actually had gone to therapy for probably 11 years. I mean, I've gone on and off. It was probably consistent for about 6 years. I mean, it was through middle school, through high school. Then when I got to college, I was trying to be more independent, still having the same behavior, still, not getting it. I didn't even feel like, honestly, therapy helped me. It just gave me an outlet to really just speak to somebody. But I just, I didn't really find the tools to really get through with what I was doing. And it's probably because I didn't know what I was dealing with. But when I got to college, it was kind of on and off, but it was probably a good 11 years I was going to therapy. The first few years, my mom and dad had different views about medicine. My mom wanted me to get on some type of antidepressant. My dad is very into holistic medicine, and we had issues with that. But I had gone to some antidepressant medicine, and actually started making me worse. And so we just kind of took the natural route and stuck with just therapy.
Now, Mel, while you were treating with the various therapists that you treated with during your childhood, did any of them ever suggest to you that perhaps you were suffering from Lyme disease?
Oh, no way. I mean, I didn't even think that. My parents didn't think that. I mean, I just don't even now, I think it's so important that people know that there are neurological and psychological side effects of this thing, because I didn't feel nearly as much physical. I felt like down the line when I had more of a relapse in the past few years. This past year, it was more physical, but I had no idea, because you're just kind of pushing through just like anybody would want to. It's like, you're mentally going through something, you're going to push through. It's not the same as seeing like, your leg broken when really something else is broken inside you. It's not as easy to diagnose that. And I think that's why it's so important. People need to know that there are side effects in that, and that's where people need to be getting checked out.
So, Mel, you indicated that when you were 12 and you had the event, you were beginning to pursue a career in modeling. Did you continue that pursuit during the rest of your childhood prior to going to college? And did your mental health challenges impact your capacity to be successful in that pursuit?
It was really traumatizing what I went through. I mean, imagine I'm training and my parents are putting up money for me to take classes, for me to just get experiences at 12 years old. This is not like I'm 18 where I can go do all this stuff, drive myself to appointments and photo shoots and this and that. To be really committed to something at 12 years old and be so passionate about that, and then to have it feel like it was ripped apart. I mean, to go to that competition, I mean, my dad would jokingly say this to make fun of it, but he was like, I guess it wasn't meant for you. And that really stung me, because I'm like, wow, is this the universe being like, no, this is not for you? And so I took a break from it. I think that's also what gave me the thoughts to get into a more rebellious behavior, because I said, oh, well, I worked hard at something, was passionate, and I did my best at something, it didn't work out. Well, fuck everything else, excuse my language. So I think that really affected me, and I think the only way I was able to get back around into the position I am now, where I do some more of that, is I had to really heal from inside out. But that whole experience was very traumatizing, and I think that's affected me mentally down the road, because I thought, I just wasn't good enough. I just thought that like, how did this happen to me? I worked so hard,
So let's talk about the not feeling good enough part of this. One of our past guests, who's an Olympic gold medalist, is a woman named Ariane Jones, and she actually put up a wonderful video on our Lyme Hackathon where she talked about self-talk and the way you talk to yourself. And she said that when she was going through her challenge, the way she was talking to herself, she would never talk to someone else. That she essentially was bullying herself. Did you find yourself engaging in that same kind of self-talk where you were being mean to yourself? The thoughts in your head were more rude in the way that you were talking to yourself than you would have ever talked to somebody else in the real world?
Oh, totally. I mean, from what I've learned so far, I mean, I look at myself when I was young and I just wish someone was there to shake me and say, hey, like, you're going to be okay. Because I think a lot of it comes down to, like, one, the stress in your life. If you're stressed, I mean, your Lyme's going to flare up. And I felt like I just wasn't handling it well. So I think, yeah, I definitely had a lot of negative self-talk. And it's odd, though, because I think it was even worse for me because I still was in sports. I still was, I had good grades. I was super social butterfly. I'm one of 5 kids. My mom unfortunately became an alcoholic as I was growing up right after that time period. So I went from, trying to heal myself, trying to heal my family. Parents got divorced. My dad lost his business. So we had a lot of turmoil. And I just pushed myself aside and, told myself that I should be grateful and then I should be, to be in the situation that at least, have a roof over my head. But it wasn't enough because I obviously was just self-sabotaging. I would just, I think really I just didn't love myself. And I think it's because I really lacked, the foundation to understand this is what you're going through and it's going to be okay. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So that's definitely a key component in me not feeling well, probably.
So now let's talk about when you went to college. Where did you go to college and what were you pursuing when you chose the college you chose to go to?
So I actually went to West Virginia University. That's the first school I went to out of college. And I went for fashion design and merchandising, which you don't really connect West Virginia with fashion design. It was the second school I was going to be going to, but I figured, tough it out. I really wanted to transfer. And then it just ended up failing out. I was partying there. I was not in control of things. I ended up going back to Maryland. And I went to community college and finished out my associates. And then following that is when I actually moved to Miami and I got my bachelor's in Miami.
So how do you believe that your Lyme disease impacted your capacity to be a successful student, first when you went to school in West Virginia, and then ultimately when you completed your associates at a community college?
I think because of the way I wasn't dealing with my neurological, I do believe I had neurological damage or issues, whatever you want to call it, and just a lot of stuff I didn't deal with mentally, and I carried on with college, especially being in a position where now I have this new sense of responsibility. I have to, basically stay committed to something. I think that I utilized the excuse of, oh, well, I just partied too hard, or I just, school wasn't for me. And I do look back at so many scenarios like that and think that what if that was my Lyme just really reaching out and was the reason why I couldn't stay focused, I couldn't commit tasks, and it was just getting worse. But of course, if you don't know, you don't think to blame it on that. So I think that was, it kind of contributed to me not being focused in school. I think the reason why it was able to refocus is because when I came back to Maryland, I was living with my family again. I had a roof over my head, so I don't have to worry about working. I had just, had that security and safety. I wasn't in a giant campus far away from home. And I think I was able to really focus on just, going to school and being disciplined with that enough that I got my associates, enough to get a plan after that to eventually go to Miami. But it took it just would be frustrating because I grew up and I feel like I had a good education, I had a, good understanding of things. It would just be frustrating that I still look back and think, I went to 3 schools, kind of wonder if that was even really necessary. I think it was just a lot of up and down in that time for me mentally.
So now let's talk about when you started to exhibit physical symptoms that brought you to the conclusion that you were suffering from a Lyme disease relapse from the bite that you had suffered when you were 12 years old. When did you start showing more physical symptoms rather than just the emotional and mental health symptoms?
I thought it was crazy. I just kind of realized this, and I never connected it before, but I don't know if you guys know about when people get stretch marks in certain areas, and they're not like the normal way your body would stretch. They're almost crossing, like the opposite. So when I was on a dance team when I was younger, all throughout high school and continued after that, and in high school, I pulled my hamstring, and it wasn't that bad, and I just remember seeing stretch marks there on the inside of my legs, which is just for my age. I've never been overweight. I believe I have muscle tone, but not to the point where it's like a bodybuilder status of ripping my skin. And I remember pulling my hamstring. I remember it was the night before a homecoming dance. We had performed for, on the football field. And I remember looking later and realizing just then that I have these stretch marks, and I didn't ever notice it before. I don't know if I just didn't see it. But I look back and I know that is a sign for when it comes to Lyme. And even to this day, I always just, it's just muscle, stuff with my muscle, stuff with my skin. I never connected it to Lyme. So that was probably the first physical sign, and I just brushed it off. I figured, I have probably a stretch mark somewhere else, and it's not a big deal. But they were pretty obvious. I mean, you see in shorts, it looks like tiger stripes, like really on the inside, especially if I got sun. But besides that, I do recall like just growing up having muscle pains. But again, I was always athletic. I was always in sports. Just the past few years, I got my personal training certification. So I just always connected it to, just my lifestyle. Everyone must feel this way, which is I'm sure a lot of people with Lyme, everyone must feel this way. I just need to get over it. And then within the past year or so, last year when I was really sick, but a year before that is when it was like chronic pain. And I also worked in nightclubs and events, physically dancing, performing shows, whatever it may be. And it would be like I'd have to take ice baths, and, I'd have to literally bring menthol with me just to get through a shift, just to get through a performance. And I just thought it was just me just overworking my body, but I figured it was mind over matter. I put myself through a lot more pain, and I was like, I'll just, keep going. It was until last year that my skin, and I always had acne, and my siblings never really had acne like me. So my dad assumes that could have been just a side effect from Lyme too, just my immune system, because the past year or two, it was so bad. I don't necessarily want to, but I do feel like at some point I will have to share people what happened with my skin. It was so bad. I could literally imagine taking your pinky finger and putting it just in your cheek, and I could literally, it was a hole. It almost looked like I had MRSA. I was going to the doctor, the dermatologist, and that's when I really noticed the physical side effects, which I now know were from Lyme. It was just my immune system crying out. And obviously I had been putting my body through a lot. So my body kind of talking to me and being like, we're sore, or my muscle aches, or this and that. I had been self-medicating in the best way I could, just to naturally take care of myself. And until my skin broke out like that, and to the point where I work in nightlife, I work plenty of crazy costumes, for shows. I had to really call up my agent and be like, if I'm working tonight, you need to find a mask for me to wear. How embarrassing is that to have that be your almost moneymaker per se? And I'd go in literally a hood over my head in Miami, hot Miami, trying to hide my face because I had Band-Aids on my face, and my face was just continued bleeding. My face got to the point where it's so swollen on my eye, it looked like someone knocked me out. Like the blood was just not flowing there, and it was so bad. I went to the dermatologist, and they assumed that I was just picking at my skin, that I had anxiety issues with my skin. So that was really infuriating, but that was the first real mark of, outside of the stretch marks, where I physically noticed something from the Lyme, where what I know now is Lyme.
Melanie, have you ever talked about Bartonella with your doctors? It's also known as cat scratch disease, which can look like stretch marks on the back of your leg or throughout your body, and it's a very common co-infection with Lyme disease.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So I didn't know that, obviously, when I was younger. I felt like the information I have now, I wish my parents knew or someone knew, but because I feel like my doctor didn't even know, was a pediatrician. But now, yeah, this past year when I got tested for everything, I did tests every month with this doctor, and found out that that's exactly what that was from, the Bartonella.
And thinking back and looking at your childhood, when you had all of these symptoms after you had your tick bite and your initial Lyme disease infection and treatment, and they manifested in the beginning as psychological symptoms, right? You said you were some depression and anxiety. When you were seeing these psychiatrists and all of these doctors, did any of them give you prescription medication to try to help your symptoms at least? Or are they just kind of telling you, you got to get yourself straight and dismissing you?
They had suggested it, but again, my parents had very different views. They were going through a divorce, so I almost also felt conflicted by that, feeling like, oh, I'm making my parents decide over how, they had conflictions over medical. So when they went to court, they, had to decide who's going to make the medical decisions. That was a big thing because my dad was very about holistic and just trying to find any option before just putting me on a pill. Let's say he's not necessarily was against me taking any medication, but was more so, just let's look at alternatives before we just put her on some drugs. And my dad had started to get into a lot of new age stuff that people are aware of now back then. So back then, imagine some stuff that people are doing, whether it's ozone therapy or rice machine work. He was doing that then and looked like a quack, And so back then, they had suggested I got on medication. I was on, I think, Prozac for like maybe 6 months to a year. And they had noticed that it just numbed me out and I had no personality and I didn't like it. It made me change my whole appetite and the whole mood and it wasn't good. I'd rather had not been on the medication than be able to just express myself whether it was good or bad.
You exhibited classic symptoms of neurological Lyme disease, and many people with neurological Lyme, when they're falsely given these medications, whether it's for depression or anxiety, they generally don't work. So would you agree that when you were on that for a short period of time, that it really didn't help you, it just sort of numbed you and turned you into this like zombie-like person?
Yeah, totally. It did not work. I didn't think it did anything to me. Because I just remember going into therapy, and actually I'm very vocal. I'm very capable of opening up and being emotional, which I like that side of myself. And I remember going in there and I didn't have anything to say. I would literally be like looking at the time. And I just remember that period being like, it was just kind of like I was just my personality, it was emotionless. And there was nothing I could even contribute to a conversation. So it's like, oh, you're not depressed, but you're also not Melanie anymore.
So you mentioned that your father had a view of holistic medicine as being a good way to treat some of your potential symptoms that you were having. But back then it was even less accepted than it is today. Did your father ever successfully treat you with anything like ozone or any of these alternative therapies that could have probably helped you back then?
No, because that's kind of when I had like this, my parents were battling back and forth. It was custody. Where's Melanie? Are you staying at mom's house or dad's house? That's what kind of was frustrating, is because if they had got over their difference, and I don't blame that at all, they didn't know. But if they had got over the difference and may have found at least come to a conclusion of solution, but they only concluded that therapy was the way to go. And I don't think that I think he didn't feel comfortable yet either, just because he had experimented or tried long enough with some of these therapies to really be able to just give it to his daughter. But he definitely was interested. I mean, he tried, teaching me more about, just even about the overall cold shower methods, just certain things that for strengthening your immune system, just breathing techniques and yoga. And I started to get into some of that with him, especially with the yoga and meditation. But outside of any of that, but some of those stuff that, I do now with ozone and, rice frequencies and stuff, I don't think he felt comfortable yet, because it was still new. And, to him, it could look like, oh, you're neglecting taking care of your child, which really, no, it's just he doesn't want to put me on medication that's not working. I mean, that's the thing, is that you have to become your own doctor with Lyme. And I'm very grateful for my dad to this day, because I think that that's what got him into actually studying new techniques of how to heal. Because if I didn't go through Lyme, and that's what I'm grateful is, if I didn't go through Lyme, I wouldn't have known these ways to heal.
Another common thing that we're seeing now presently in the Lyme community, especially on Instagram, is a concept called depersonalization. Have you heard of that concept?
Yes.
So there's an account we follow at Body Lyme Spirit on Instagram, and they give a really good description of what it was, and I'm not going to do even close to what it deserves. But really, it's when you sort of experience this out-of-body experience, and it's almost like your body is disconnected from your mind. So can you walk us through what that's like? Because many Lymies feel this, And it puts this fear in them that something is wrong and maybe it's more than just Lyme, but it's not. This is a symptom of neurological Lyme. So can you walk us through what that was like for you, for our listeners?
Yeah, you know what I noticed that actually when I was young, I actually noticed that when I was in middle school and high school, and I thought it was just kind of a moment of relapse in my mind because I remember I would say something, but then it would be like it was almost like my body was saying it, and like words would come out, or I thought, but no one would respond to me. And I look at myself and be like, well, did I just say that, or is that something I just imagined? And it was like my body was disconnected from what I was really experiencing. And then I'd have to say something again, and it was clear that the person never heard me say something for the first time. So that's like the only type of out of body experience I kind of had, and it was a little scary, and it still happens here and there. And I just try to more so acknowledge it instead of being afraid of it, because it is it's almost just like a lapse in your mental judgment of what's going on.
Now, before you realized that all of this was still just symptoms and a consequence of your Lyme disease, was there anything you did that helped alleviate your symptoms that you can recommend to our listeners? So, for example, you had this depersonalization, you had some of the psychological problems like depression, you had some other body pain issues, like you mentioned, you had chronic body pain, the skin issues with your face. Was there anything you did that worked well for you before you knew it was Lyme that you can recommend to our listeners who are having similar issues?
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest part of it for me, and like I think a lot of people notice that when they're stressed, they flare up. And for me, is really just maintaining a calm, neutral level, and just try not to let everything get you in that way, because a lot of things can be manifested physically from just something you've experienced emotionally or mentally. I think journaling is so important, whether you're just journaling about your symptoms or you're journaling about just what you're going through. It just finding a way to release that type of those thoughts for me helps so much. I mean, it has, and just try to even be creative with it. If you're not really into journaling, writing's not your thing. For me, I love writing. I could write all day. Maybe just to have some form of an outlet to get it out, because I think a lot of times we let this build up in us, and we're not even aware where it's coming from, or we're just like, oh, I'm feeling this way and I don't know what's going on. You kind of get in a state of panic because you're like, how is this not something I can easily fix? But you have to, I think, in addition to that, and trying to find a way to be active too. I think, ironically enough, that you made a tick in nature. I think being in nature and being outdoors and just being able to connect with like Mother Earth is so powerful. And it's so therapeutic. And I know that doesn't seem like, oh, well, that's not going to cure Lyme right away. But you know what? If you do that every morning, if you have time to yourself every day, or you're just walking in nature, if you have time to journal, a lot of this, it really comes down to being able to get your mental strength. And then, okay, you're mentally strong. Now we can face the physical stuff.
So Melanie, can you walk us through the crash that you had in January of 2019? So now you're out of school, you go on this trip to Colorado, you go on this hiking experience that you went on a quick vacation, and then you had this physical crash. Can you walk us through that experience?
So my skin had already been breaking up until that point. I mean, I literally had almost like a scar on the side of my face. I mean, I still do. You probably can't see it in this video, but I went out there. My dad invited me to hike with my aunt and my two cousins out there. They have a cabin out all the way in Colorado. I think it was about 2-hour drive from Denver. So we drove out there. We were hiking, exploring outside. I mean, it was very active. I felt okay. And then it was literally the last day of our trip. I felt so nauseated. I felt in so much pain. I felt like my entire body ached. And I don't know if it was just me pushing my body too much during that trip. I mean, we were pretty active, but it wasn't something I wasn't used to. It got so bad. I had to lay down the entire car ride up into the airport, and it got so bad I couldn't even walk. I mean, I tried to really just close my eyes and be like, Melanie, you can do this, you can do this. I tried to I couldn't even stand up. They had to put my bags on back of a wheelchair, and they had to wheelchair me through the airport. And meanwhile, I am not really good with controlling my emotions, so I'm holding back tears this entire time because I'm just like, what is happening? Am I really this sick? I've been through some sick times, and I've muscled through working in a crazy loud nightclub or at a music festival where I felt sick and just not feeling well in general. And I'm like, I've been through way worse stuff. How can I not just stand in line to go through security? This is unbelievable. I get there. My dad was flying back to D.C. and I was flying back to Miami. Had 12 hours until my flight. So I'm curled up in a ball underneath the airport seats. I found some little secluded area where, you know, like, I guess it was at the end where no one was actually sitting at. There was no one at that gate. And I just literally curled up under a ball around my luggage and just tried to wait it out. And I felt so sick. I mean, I just felt like all over my body, someone was squeezing my arms and my legs and my neck and my head, like just pulsating. And I couldn't eat. I was just trying to stay hydrated throughout the entire time. I had someone to actually assigned to me to like help me get on the air, you know, on the plane. When I get back, I get all the way to Miami. I ended up, when I got to Miami, I think I just knocked out. My body finally knocked out, and almost was mentally, I knew I was home, so I fell asleep. And I thought it was just a stomach bug or some sickness, but that really sparked. It was just, you know, right after that, it was really what sparked me getting really, really sick. I got back, I made it home, but then I didn't really connect that after that point, I was practically bedridden. I mean, I would have work and working late at night in a nightclub, and I remember I just last minute call up, like, I can't come in, like, I can't even get up to do my makeup, nothing. And it just continued like that every week, like, I can do it, and then last minute, nope, I can't do it. And it got weeks of that, of not working and having just to order Uber Eats food because I couldn't even make anything in my fridge. My trash was piling up in my house. I mean, I couldn't do my laundry. I was literally running out of clothes. It was so bad, and I was so afraid to reach out for someone to help, especially someone like in my nature, always, you know, out and about. I work in events. I mean, anybody who knew me knew that, like, I work all the time. I like working. I like having that sense of accomplishment and sense of, you know, self-sufficiency. And also, in addition to that, always staying active, always taking care of myself. How am I sick? Like, how I couldn't reach out to someone else for help because that would just be embarrassing. So it went on for like probably 2 months or something like that. So January up until March, until I finally reached out to my dad. And my skin at that point was so bad. My face was swollen. I had multiple scar wounds in my face. It just, I mean, it was just felt like it was eating me from the inside out.
Melanie, looking back, do you think it's possible that you potentially get reinfected? You were hiking and you were in nature. So you think it's possible that you had multiple tick bites throughout your life and you could have been reinfected, which made your sickness that much worse?
It could have been, but I mean, I did think about that because I noticed that I was just naturally out in nature more often I mean, I remember I would bike ride on my bike almost at least 2 hours a day, like maybe at least 5 times a week, just I'd utilize it. I got in a car accident, which I didn't get hurt or anything, but I lost my car, and I got a really nice bike. I grocery shop with it. I go to the gym with it. I even go to castings with it. And I was outside a lot more than I used to be. And so I did think that could be a potentially, you know, some sort of possibility. But then it's hard for me to admit that and think that, okay, if I just got bit by a tick when I was young, then what was all the psychological and physical pain and even the Bartonella marks, you know, that were kind of in between that time period if supposedly I was healed from mine before and I was bit by another tick?
Yeah, so do you think it's possible that you were bit when you were 12 and then you were bit again maybe numerous times throughout your life, and that's why you had those psychological symptoms, the Bell's palsy, the Bartonella when you were younger, and then you got bit again throughout your life, which made you get even more sick to your ultimate crash in January of 2019?
I don't think so because it's the type of nature I'm out in. I mean, in Miami where I was outside all the time, I guess it's possible, but there's not even really trees like that. And I'm not in nature. I'd be biking on the side of a road, you know, where there's not really as much, you know, what you say wildlife, or right. But growing up, it would make more sense. Okay, if maybe I had gotten bit by a tick again, maybe a few years after I initially got it when I was 12, because I was still residing in Maryland. I still was active in nature. It's definitely a possibility. But after I had got bit by that tick and we had found out that it was technically Lyme at 12, I mean, I was still checking like crazy. So I feel like it would have been just a rare chance that really was to have happened.
Another thing to consider is, at the time you had chronic Lyme disease and you didn't know it. And many people with chronic Lyme disease get really sick and have relapses and their health worsens after traveling. So do you think that the travel experience was the cause of your decline in health, potentially due to exposure to other people who are being sick, the stress of traveling, and all the things that go along with it?
When you say traveling, do you mean, because I've obviously traveled a few times in my life, specifically when when I went to college or moving to Miami?
Well, we're thinking maybe when you went to Colorado for that trip to go hiking, that's when your
Oh,
crash sort of
okay.
began right after that. So do you think your trip to Colorado and the stress of traveling on your body and your immune system, that just put your body at an all-time low, and that's what caused your major decline from that point forward?
Okay, yeah, no, that, I mean, it's a great point because I never actually connected that before because I was out in nature. I mean, out hiking around. I mean, it's then granted, I don't know the ecosystem out there, I guess, but now that you say that, that's potentially possible that I was hiking out there, and in that process, I had a tick on me. I'm not thinking about ticks at all at that point because I'm just thinking that's just kind of the more inhabited and kind of not like a colder climate, which is totally possible. They could be out there, and I could have easily got bit there. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine because when you shower and naturally you're looking at your body, you don't see it. Then again, I could have gotten bit and it could have came off. But I mean, that could have been a very likely possibility, just the fact that I was directly in nature. I was outdoors a lot, and it happened right afterwards.
So now that you're back from this vacation and your health is declining, you mentioned you just fought through it for a few months. At what point did you find out that all of this was the consequence of the Lyme disease from when you were a child? How did you find that, doctor? What was that connection which finally gave you that aha moment that this is all just from chronic Lyme disease?
I actually have a lot of conversations that I've had with my dad. My dad has been really my savior in all this because he's been just on it about, like, let's try to find the next new thing. Just like how you said you talked with Richard about just calling back and forth, like, did you know about this? And you do about that? That's the conversations we would have. And of course, I'm my dad's daughter. He wants to make sure I'm well. So for him to find any new information, we're going to go back and forth. So I think it comes down to that his really being compassionate about this whole situation, I think had helped me kind of look into it. I started in a lot of issues with my dad. I rebelled against him mostly, and I think growing up, he kind of also wondered too, like, was I a bad parent? Like, was I not doing the right things? I mean, all my other kids kind of were more behaving, and they didn't have all these issues, and really wanted to help me, not necessarily kind of take blame away from him, but like, what was it that really wasn't working out? And for a while, I had a lot of issues even with connecting with my father because I always thought that even kind of blamed some on him, kind of, this is a result of your bad parenting, you not being there for me, this is why I was like this. Now, it could have been a combination of that, but I know surely that a majority was me just being affected from Lyme. And it's sad to say that, like, that has affected my relationship with my parents, and I'm just glad to have come to that conclusion with him. He'll just bring some attention to it, and probably within this past year of just being home and him being this under my care, kind of looking back, like, let's go back and do a check box and say, okay, was this happening to you? Was this happening to you? And really, me and him kind of going through side by side, we were able to look back and and I was able to be vulnerable and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe I really was, depressed or not feeling well because of this, and we didn't connect to it. So really, my dad was the one who brought my attention to a lot of this because, I mean, even still to this day, I'm finding out new information, and I don't use it as a way to blame it on Lyme and just be like, oh, well, that's because of Lyme, and just an easier excuse. It gives me a way to really look into it deeper and say, hey, you know what? And this raises some red flags. Maybe we'll look into why, maybe I had experienced this, and I didn't necessarily have to if I had the answers that people do now, maybe with Lyme.
So now that you and your dad are having this exchange when you're really sick and you're going back and forth and you're starting to connect the dots that all of these things that you're experiencing since you've been 12 could be now correlated back to your ultimate tick bite and your Lyme disease. What doctor did you go to now explore this option to see if your guess and your research was accurate?
So when I first found out the holes in my face, and that was like the biggest sign that I didn't even think it was Lyme. We thought it was some type of skin thing. I thought it was like MRSA, or, I mean, I got checked for all that, wasn't anything. So when I was sent it, I had been looking for probably about a year, just Googling what was happening to my skin. And I'm not sure if you heard of the controversial topic of Morgellons, but that's the first doctor that I went to go see, is someone who deals with that. Now, I knew that it's still kind of controversial. People don't really know. They think it's a psychological thing, which I still don't know. I believe that could be both. It could be a play of the mind, but I can't deny, and I have video footage and pictures, and I can't deny what I physically felt, let alone seen on my skin. So the first doctor I went to was Ginger Savely, and she has a great, huge community of people who she helps with Morgellons, and who typically patients with Morgellons, I think all of them actually, they're around the roots thing between them all is that they all have Lyme. And that's where we started going from there. She was super helpful just to kind of educate us. I don't work with her any longer. I just feel like we have different viewpoints about how to handle it. She kept me on medication a little too long, and I didn't want to be dependent on it. And my dad had a lot of other alternatives through his holistic doctor who practices clean heart work. So we kind of combined both those. But initially, I went to see Ginger Savely, and she helped me a lot with just really even understanding with like what my body was going through.
And at that point, what treatment options, or what was this doctor recommending you do to try to get better? And were those things working for you?
It was pretty tough. I mean, my dad wanted me to see his holistic doctor, and I think overall I wanted to, and he wanted me to continue to see Ginger Savely just because she seemed to be an expert in that. And fortunately enough, we had an appointment with her, and she lived right in Washington D.C., which is close to where we were in Maryland. So I figured while I'm up in Maryland getting treated, it would be a safe haven there. She had me on a few different medications, which I had to kind of slowly start. I think I don't even know the names of them. I'm so bad at these medications, but the few medications were basically to flush me out. And what I experienced is I started with one, and I started with the second one maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. What it did, I got the Hertzmer reaction. So that was basically, if people don't know what that is, I'm sure you guys do, it's when your body, it doesn't recognize that the medicine that you're taking is not trying to kill the bad stuff inside you, that it's actually so powerful, it believes it's dying. So your body is like under this state that feels like it's actually trying to fight this process because it thinks, oh my God, you're killing us. I remember my temperature got below like 96 degrees. It was very odd. I really felt like I was going to die. I thought I was going to die before, and meanwhile, I'm trying to get better, and then you have to go through this process. And it was about a month of that. I mean, fever, and then my temperature would go down. I had to take ice baths. I mean, I had to eat a certain diet even before I started that medication to basically make sure my body wasn't going to have an allergic reaction to maybe was eating tomatoes or eating certain, like, if it was anything with lemon, certain things that would kind of trigger the medication. But I had to be very particular about how I started it. And then in addition to that, I was taking these, I forgot what you call it, these droplets of different type of natural medicine, just different type of roots, different type of conjures that was a tea that I had to drink 3 times a day. I had to prepare it right there in the moment. I mean, this process, it was so tedious. I mean, and in addition to not being well, just to have to ask someone to make you a tea sounds so ridiculous, but I couldn't even do that. So we were doing the medications with Ginger Savely, and then I was doing the more natural method with the different teas that I was drinking for the holistic doctor that I was seeing.
The medication with Ginger do you recall what that medication was that caused you to hurt so bad?
If I give you a second, I can just actually look it up. Oh, it was a Bactrim and Biaxin. I know there's official names for them, but both of them, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's what those are the two. And then there was a sulfametazole, or I think it was another one, which I had already taken once for my skin before, and I think doxycycline. So those both were my skin, but the Bactrim and Biaxin were the ones that are so bad. I didn't even think a medication could do that. And for me, it was pretty disturbing even to think afterwards. I do think it helped because it got me over the initial pain, because my skin started, my face was practically swollen from how much inflammation I had in my face and the rest of my body. And I couldn't also digest food normally. I was eating normally, but I was just losing weight. So that helped with that initially. But it was definitely painful, and the Hertzmer reaction came with those too.
And now this was treatment still for the Margellans through your first doctor, and then you were going with your natural doctor with those tinctures and the herbal teas to just treat your body at a holistic level, correct?
Correct. So she treated me with the Margellans, but I know a lot of I just looked up. We did a lot of research. Also, people with Lyme were able to have success with the same type of practices.
Yeah, so a lot of these medications are also used to treat Lyme as well, and it seems like that's what it was doing, was treating the Lyme bacteria and causing your hurts. So did she also believe that you had Lyme too, or was this just a coincidence that you were being given this medication that would treat the Lyme disease?
No, she believed I had Lyme too. I mean, we did tests and everything. They found if I looked at my paperwork, they had found the Bartonella, the Babesia, Borrelia. Like, those were all things that were in my body that they found.
So talk to us about some of the things you did to alleviate your symptoms now with this new doctor team, your natural doctor through your dad, and now following Klinghart's protocol. In your pre-interview questionnaire, you mentioned things like ozone therapy and this miracle mineral solution and medicated lotion and cold showers. So can you talk to us about which of those worked best for you and what advice you'd give our listeners to use those things to help alleviate their symptoms?
I mean, to each his own. I think that this is really a process of like trial and error with anyone, because I could tell you what works for me and you may not suffer as much as the physical stuff. You may suffer more than emotional stuff. But I think it's kind of trying to put a combination and to start slowly, because initially my dad gave me all this stuff and I'm like, I can't do this all in one day. I can't do this, and that. Like, I'm just trying to slowly adapt to this. So that's what I would say to anyone who's trying to figure out what can help them heal. Just start slowly and just document it all, record it all. I took pictures, I took videos, documented my skin. The most powerful thing to me is, like, I have a lot of body aches and I like to still work out. I do personal training still, so it's part of my life. This is not something that I can just stop. So with that, the most important being the physical, I have found that having any type of CBD or any type of that medicated lotion, in addition to essential oils, have been very powerful for me as well for calming, which can be therapeutic, but even just essential oils to rub on the body for when you have muscle pain. I'll do that right before I go to bed. I get peppermint oil or do CBD medicated lotion, and I rub it on certain areas. I know I always get cramps in my legs throughout the night. I'll get like muscle spasm or almost like restless leg syndrome, and that will be something I could put on and will soothe it. In addition to that, I don't know if you've heard of the plant kratom, but they sell it at smoke shops, so it would probably fall under the category of something like CBD, but you put it in a tea, and actually it's called Mitrina speciosa. That's the natural name of the plant. And it comes to the same plant as coffee, and it actually works just like how they have different strands of, THC for maybe something, being more mellow or something being more active. It's the same thing, and they have one that I take. I put it about a tablespoon in my tea in hot water, and I drink it. It does not taste good, but I'm telling you, it works wonders for my muscle pain. And in addition, also helps me a lot with focus. For coffee, it's always just kept me awake. It never helped me with focus. And I have a lot of brain fog that I know is attributed to Lyme that I'm constantly trying to work through. I get distracted very easily. When I take that, it helps me a lot with just staying focused and just following through with the simple tasks of the day. And so I think kratom is very powerful. The CBD medicated lotion. In addition, the ozone therapy my dad put me on too. I drink ozone water every morning. I try to drink it throughout the day. And then I also have, because my skin was breaking out, I had ozonated oils that I would put on my face. So if I ever felt like my skin was just kind of out of sorts, and sometimes I always feel like my skin, because of the Morgellons, would actually kind of flare up, and almost I would feel it, almost as something was biting you, and I put that on and immediately it would feel better. So the ozone is definitely a new therapy I think a lot of people should look into. And in addition to that, this is something that, may be controversial to some people, but I do believe also in the power of frequencies. There's a great site. If you just look in Google called Right Frequencies, I used to use that because I'd always have fatigue in the morning after working out. Anytime I would just listen to that, take a nap, and it would 20 minutes, I would feel so much better. And it's crazy because we naturally have a frequency in our body. And when you listen to that frequency, I don't know the science behind it, but I know that it basically picks on certain tones in your body, and it almost like recalibrates you. I did the same thing too. I'd also get nausea when I would ride in a Uber in the car in the passenger side. I had to sit in the back because I just couldn't handle the nausea. And I know that was actually a side effect of when I was on medication. I couldn't take the medication, just hop in the Uber right away. And I would listen to the frequency on my headphones in there for a nausea frequency. And I wouldn't feel sick, because I would feel sick at the point of throwing up sometimes, and they would just completely eliminate it. So I think the ozone, the right frequencies, the kratom and CBD are definitely like something I try to always keep in my regimen. And that's outside even diet and just physical stuff as well.
Melanie, those are all excellent tips. And to get a little more specific for our listeners who are interested in the right frequencies, where did you get this right frequency machine? It sounds like it's something you can kind of listen to while you're in an Uber or something like that. So where did you get it, and what would you recommend to our listeners who want to learn more about this to potentially look into this technology?
I'm going to look up the actual, I have it right here, right? Okay, so the site is actually called Rife Therapies, and they've been around for a long time. It's the name that actually should pop up when you're looking for it. It's Spoopy2, and they have a whole list of all different types of issues. Like you can type in, maybe if you have abdominal pain, if you have muscle cramps, menstrual cramps, if you have, acne, if you have a rash on your body. I mean, every type of thing comes down to something internally, right? Even if the cause is from something external, you can still heal it internally. So my dad, he had a right feet machine when I was younger. That's one of the therapies he used for himself to kind of just meditate, recalibrate. And I remember using it when I was younger, but of course my family had different views about how to heal. But overall, the right therapy, my dad introduced it to me when we were just trying to find any means of just trying to heal in that moment. And a lot of these healing methods come from over time and consistency. And okay, you've been doing this for 2 weeks now. You finally start to feel effects. Can you feel kind of more instantaneously? And this was the first thing that I ever noticed. Like, wow, I actually feel better within this half hour. This is crazy. I think that you could either get the Rife machine, which is 2 bars. They're actually like electrodes that you actually hold in your hand and connect to a machine, and they will emit the frequency and a vibration, which you'll feel in your body. You almost feel like you're holding that zap gum, that trick gum where you actually get zapped. You hold that in your hand, and you actually feel the frequencies go through your body. Now, if you don't do that, it's just as powerful. If you plug your headphones in or listen to it very loud on your phone or say like your computer, and you should be able to hear it almost kind of echoing when you're listening to it, to be that loud. And it just works wonders, man. I think that will be really the future of healing with a lot of people. I think even there's a lot of places that know the benefits of that, and it's kind of one of those things that's kind of a kept secret because they don't want people to heal themselves. But I'm telling you here that you can totally do that with this.
Melanie, you are our 107th podcast guest, and nobody has explained that as well as you have. So I just wanted to let you know that was told brilliantly. I just learned so much from that, so thank you for explaining it that way. That was just brilliant. And I want to jump back to the essential oils, because you mentioned that they help you both with your physical pain and emotionally as well. So you mentioned that peppermint oil applied topically to your skin can help alleviate some of the pain and the muscle spasms and things like that. But what essential oils did you use to help you emotionally, and how did you use them? Did you use them in a diffuser, topically? And we want to try to give our listeners some advice about how to use essential oils with specific symptoms to Lyme disease.
So I actually have a humidifier running here because when it was a little chilly here actually, and we had a heater running, and it was just like really dry air. So I actually brought my humidifier up here, and I realized that I hadn't used it in a while, and I noticed how many different other oils that I could use in there. But usually, if you're not doing it through a humidifier, which kind of emits it through the air, kind of adds moisture. I think it's better for me for overall for my skin. My skin can naturally be dry, so it's kind of like putting moisture in addition to essential oil in the air. But for me, I use the top of it. I literally put a few drops and rub it in between my hands. I kind of rub my hands back together, create some heat, and then I just breathe it in. Just use it as aromatherapy. I'll do it for me and my boyfriend in the morning, especially. I do the peppermint oil in my hands to energize me. So in addition, in the morning, if I'm taking the kratom or have some tea in the morning, I do that. I rub it together and take a deep inhale and then gut it out. And then I do the rubbing hands together again, deep inhale. And I do that about 3 times. And it's definitely a little way to get a boost. I mean, you're just breathing in straight menthol. It's cooling, it's energizing. But in addition to something that's more maybe calming or therapeutic, I actually really like lavender for more nighttime, but I really like citrus. The citrus is still a little bit more energizing, but it's not so like strong like maybe the scent of peppermint. But it's kind of just has a nice touch. Also, putting it on you, you're not walking around with some crazy menthol. I know all the time when I was dealing with side effects from physical pain, I smell like menthol all the time. My friends always be like, "Oh my God, it's a little too much." But the citrus is a nice tone that you could wear it. And I admit that instead of using fragrances, I use essential oils. And you can even put that in your lotion, put a little lotion in your hands, add a drops, put that in your hand, rub it together, maybe rub it on your neck or your chest. The points that I usually put it on, even if going back to the peppermint, is just to continually have it. I rub it through my hands and I put one little tiny dot right above my lip, just the slightest bit, nothing that's super wet, and it's there continuously. I'm constantly breathing it in.
And the peppermint you use to sort of energize, you said, right?
Yeah, energized for sure.
And now the citrus and the lavender, you mentioned you put that in your lotion. You can put it on topically, almost as like a scented sort of like perfume sort of alternative. But do you also inhale that as well? So is that one that you would do rubbing your hands and inhale as well?
You can. I usually inhale the peppermint one because I feel like I need that burst of energy. That's something more I'm lacking. But to wind down, I actually will take the lavender and I rub it on just my pointer finger, and I do it on the sides of my temples, and I just kind of rub it in right there. And it's almost it's the center right between your ears and your eyes. It kind of relaxes you. It's kind of, don't get it in your eye, of course, but that, and the same thing with the citrus. I'll usually put that on my wrist and rub my wrist together. And then I can, you also can inhale it the same, but you put that right underneath my ear. So again, it's kind of close to where I'm breathing in, but it's not like the peppermint where I need it right underneath my nose, where I really need it that strong. It's just like a subtle note.
And the last thing I want to focus on as far as things you've done to help your symptoms is the cold showers, because many Lymies vary. Some Lymies really, really need cold, and other Lymies can't stand the cold. And the same thing with heat. So for you personally, how did the cold showers help you with your symptoms?
I think both really helped me, actually. Like the heat, the being in the sauna, I didn't put that because I think the cold showers are still more important. But I just feel like when I take cold showers, and actually did yesterday, I jumped. There's a huge lake out here. I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna jump in the lake and go and do a lot of Wim Hof breathing methods. And I try to kind of calm my body down, but then actually put my body in a state of cold. So I do that if I'm going to do something like going in this like cold lake out here. But with the cold showers, I just try to, it kind of makes you sure that you have a shorter shower. We don't need to be in showers for 20 minutes. But in addition to that, it feels like totally rejuvenating. And it's almost more of a mental hack than it is even physical, because you're kind of just like, okay, you got to get through this. You got to get through this. And you're not thinking about anything else, but just, it's cold, but it's okay. I think that's almost like a therapy that helps me to kind of mentally get through some painful things. It's like, just like animals out in the wilderness, they're probably faced with a lot more than we are. And over a period of time, human species, we've just gotten a lot more convenient life. But when you go back to this animalistic nature, I mean, we're fully capable of being in those environments and being okay. And I think putting your body into that state reminds you that you can handle a lot. So for me, it's even more mental because it reminds me that, you know, I'm fully capable of going through something painful and coming out okay on the other side. In addition to that, for me, it helps a lot with my skin. The coldness and that type of pressure really helps with close my pores. It kind of helps just clear out my skin even more than taking like a hot shower per se. And just overall my circulation, I feel like it even probably contributes, and I don't know for a fact, but I believe it even contributes to the blood flow when it comes to the blood flow even around my muscles, so kind of helping when it comes to muscle soreness as well.
So which of these things we've discussed are part of the Klinghardt protocol to treat Lyme, if any? And if none of these things are part of the Klinghardt protocol, what things did you do as part of that protocol to help your recovery?
So these are all things that he suggests. Ozone therapy, being one of them, and the right machines. He has worked with all those, but his specific protocol came to all the different tinctures, which were together. They combined it to make a really, I mean, it was just an overall detox for me, and really not in the bad way. Typically, when you go through a detox, the first couple of days, your body is kind of going through almost like a painful, almost like a natural Herxheimer reaction, like what's going on, you know. But I think that Klinghardt had a great method, and I initially started it, and that was probably for the first 6 to 8 months. But I started to go back to work when I finally moved back to Miami, and it was difficult to follow up with. But I took the advice from my dad, and I decided that, you know, it's better than doing nothing. Because sometimes I'll get in this mode where I was like, well, if I didn't, you know, make one tea today, then I'm not going to continue to do it. No, like, it's better to still keep trying to work at it. It is a lot to stay on top of all these different regimens, all these different, you know, I call it a toolbox. You know, how many different things in your toolbox are you working on today? And you may not get to all of them, but I think it's constant, you know, a reminder that, you know, you just got to keep at it. And I think Klinghardt had a lot of different, or at least my doctor through Klinghardt had recommended a lot of different tinctures. I mean, there was probably about 24 different ones, and I made a tea 3 times a day, and you'd have to make it right there in a moment. You couldn't prepare it. So it was a lot of planning. I mean, I remember at one point I traveled to South Carolina for a trip, and I had to bring all my stuff with me, and of course it broke under TSA, broke all my luggage, so that was not fun. But it's definitely something I think when I come back to Miami, because I didn't bring all that stuff with me, I'm going to start back onto. I wish I had it here because it's the perfect time for me just to focus on really healing, because I'm not working. I'm capable of having a moment of a flare up or something like that in case I have a side effect because I don't have anything to tend to. But Klinghardt stuff is great, and he definitely recommends all the other stuff with ozone and with the right frequencies. I think those are the most powerful ones.
Melanie, I just want to put a reminder out there for our listeners that a year ago, you were basically homebound and bedbound, but here you are today, a year later. I mean, you look great, you sound great, your mind is very clear. I mean, you're explaining things to us just so well. So how do you feel today? And I think we know the answer to that based on what we just said, but walk us through about where you are today with your health and what you see for the future of your health.
Like you said in the beginning about my influence on social media and things like that, that there's always been this image I've had to portray of being healthy and well and active, and I live in Miami, and I really uprooted myself from Maryland to Miami and set a goal for myself. I followed the law of attraction. I was like, I'm going to work in events down there. I'm going to finish my bachelor's degree. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to have an active lifestyle. I even manifested rollerblading in South Beach, you know, like really trying to just have this dream, and I'm able to follow through with that, but I don't want people to get lost in that image, because really there is a lot of pain behind certain pictures and even just certain times in my life. But I want to be an example for people that, you know, you can get better. I mean, at one point you look at, and that's why I want to open up. I mean, I really kind of broke down the beginning of this month, because I was like, wow, I really have come so far, but nobody knows. I mean, nobody knows my journey, and I'm in the process of opening up, and I think that's so important for people to share their story. I have a friend who has eczema, and she had this whole journey that she went through, and she told me it was so therapeutic for just to share her story, and I feel like I'm finally comfortable because I am finally well, and I can look back and say, hey, you know what, that wasn't such a great point in my life, but I did this, and I was able to heal myself. And I'm hoping that, with your guys' podcast and me sharing and being more vulnerable as someone you would typically think, oh, your life's so great. Everyone goes through something, and it's really not about what happens to you, but how you deal with it.
So now we get to the point where we want to have you share with us what has been beautiful about this experience, and what do you believe the results of this Lyme disease journey have been that have made you the person you are now?
I think that the most beautiful thing about this is and this is going to make me cry, is that this kind of saved my relationship with my dad. I'm his first daughter. I'm one of 5 kids. I think he was really lost growing up. What did I do wrong? How is my daughter suffering so much? And I think that, it kind of allowed him to forgive himself, which I'm so happy to do that for him, but also to bring me closer to him in our journey of healing. My dad, before he even did any therapy thing with me, any type of ozone or rice machine or anything, he always did it himself because he didn't want to give me anything that him as his own healthy body couldn't handle. And I'm just grateful because I had a really toxic person in my life about this time 2 years ago, and that's what led up to this time a year ago that I was so sick. And it made me really grateful for the people who care for me in my life. And it really made me realize, who are the people who really love you, I mean, you could go through day to day and think, and it's not to just to reflect on people who aren't your friends or aren't really there for you, but to really reflect on those people that you are always in your corner and that will always have your back, and it's not afraid to reach out to them. I mean, it took me so long of being this independent person to finally reach out to my family and say, I'm not okay. And I'm so grateful for that because I have the strongest relationship with my family ever. I could ask them for anything if I need it. And maybe not everyone will have that relationship, but there's someone out there for somebody. And even to anyone who's listening now, there is a person that you can call on when you're not feeling well. And I don't want anyone to have to go through the pain, just to realize that you've always had someone in your corner. And I've also realized I'm so grateful for the amount of knowledge that I know now, whether it be about ticks or just overall strengthening your immune system, that I can just share with my friends who even are healthy, hey, let's do this. I want to know that people in my circle, or even outside my circle, any person I have influenced is finding a way of healing through what I've taught them. And that was so powerful to me because I'm grateful to have gone through this because it showed me really how strong I am. And I thought I was strong before, but man, when you're a Lyme warrior, you really go through something like this, you realize that you're so much more capable than you believe.
And Melanie, we really want to thank you for using your social media platform as a vehicle for conveying so much of the beauty of your journey. And we encourage you to continue to do that and let folks know that although you are portraying a very healthy and beautiful appearance during many of the shots that you put up on your social media, that there is also this painful side of this journey that you're still undergoing, and that your life is not as perfect as it would appear to be when you're in so many of these beautiful places and so many beautiful scenes in Miami during the course of your career. So now I want to ask you for one more bit of help. If God forbid tomorrow your dad called you up and said, "Hey, Mel, I have a tick biting me on my leg," what would you recommend that he would do so that he wouldn't have to go through the terrible journey that you've had to go through?
It's sad because I even wish I knew more information about this now, about what to do, but I would obviously have him to remove it with tweezers or what you can do and wrap it up in a plastic baggie and have it sent in immediately to be looked at. I don't think that time is really of the essence of this. So the sooner you can find out, and really even to demand to know, is this actually, infected with Lyme? Because I think a lot of people, they kind of have wish-washy answers, and it's really about you getting to the bottom of it right then and there, and doing what you can even in that time to strengthen your immune system. I mean, all the things with the ozone therapy, right? But those things you can be doing in that moment to really make sure that your immune system is strong enough to even fight anything if that tick had bit you.
Thank you for listening to the Tick Boot Camp interview with guest Melanie Hubert. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Melanie Hubert and her tick disease journey, please visit her at Bombshell X Mel. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of the post. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been provided to us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at www.tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. Please note we would appreciate any input or information you would like to share with us. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, please take a minute to leave us an honest review and rating on iTunes or on our website. Thank you for listening.